Welcome to the Consummate Athlete Podcast, where we explore what it means to be a well-rounded, happy, goal-crushing athlete. Every week, myself, sports journalist Molly Herford, and cycling coach and kinesiologist Peter Glassford interview experts and chat through all of your training questions. We're excited to have you along for the ride. Hello. Welcome back to the Consummate Athlete Podcast. Peter, how's it going?
I'm psyched. Just absolutely psyched to be here.
Just so psyched. Okay, so it is December 4th as we are recording this, which means
Checklists. We've been having marital battles about checklists for the holidays.
Stay tuned for next week's Q&A on that topic.
The maritals or the checklists?
Both.
Okay.
Both. We're gonna go deep. But no, I meant you made it past November without getting on the trainer. So you completed your no trainer in November.
Big annual goal.
Which like this year, kudos, because it has not been a super easy last couple of weeks.
I didn't think this year was that bad, but I think also I was just extra lazy this year. I just didn't train as much.
Maybe that's actually the key
I always say that's the key. Yeah. I mean, you don't have to train. So I always say I'm not that hard. I just sometimes go for a walk instead of riding my bike. But there was a few days that were like rougher, but I honestly, I rode yesterday, which was in December, and it was the roughest day. Like it was around freezing and raining and splashing up, and my fenders didn't fit on, and I've been very lazy about putting my fenders on. So I very quickly, like I always have a moment in the fall when my last race is over where I'm like, yes, back on the bike, definitely going to ride a lot more. And then the weather turns and I'm like, absolutely not. Back to running. Running is the only way to do it. Yeah, I could see with the indoor trainer for runners for sure. But yeah, it's a horrible time to decide you want to ride a bicycle.
Yeah, I will. However, I do plan on getting on the indoor trainer a little bit, just as a bit of cross training. And I've been writing up all of these things for bicycling about like how to use Trainer Road and Zwift and full gas and all of these.
It's a whole new world. Yeah. It seems like this year there's been not a lot of competitors but it seems like this year there's a few more that are at least getting, past the initial point of like, there's something new, and then people try it and then you never hear about it again. Yeah. So we'll see if anything persists.
Yeah. Maybe I can just run them all at once. Like just go like 8 screens in front of me. Just like,
yeah, that would be good. It's probably make indoor training less unenjoyable.
Bored on this screen. Let me look at the other screen and the other screen and the other, which I think is what most people do anyway. Now that I think about it.
Yeah, you need to have 3 for sure.
At least minimum. Anyway, today's guest, however, is not about the screens. He is much more into the overused epic phrase. But honestly, when you're talking about Tour Divide, how can you not say epic?
Well, I mean, yeah, I don't even know if that's bikepacking at this point. Yeah, but it's bikepacking. It's sort of a race now, but not a race, but it's sort of a race. People go very fast. There are record times. But we have Brook Smith back, he's been on at least
once talking about bikepacking in the past. Yeah,
I think he might have been on twice. We should have checked this beforehand, but we'll link to those past ones because Brook is a guy who I worked with. I've coached Brook for XC Racing, and then he sort of graduated and went on to doing bikepacking and is just he's really good. He's set some FKTs. He's done, Tour Divide. He's done some massive trips on all scales, right? Some of these, 3, 4, 5 day, 7 day, but then into this Tour Divide that's getting into like measured, now in weeks, I guess. So just really neat talking through all the experience, all the gear, all the strategy. He builds his own bags, which is really neat. His mom, I believe, was like a seamstress. So he, had learned how to sew and build these bags. So yeah, just really, really cool adventures. And we talk towards, someone like Brook coming from, having raced a little bit across country, but like by no means like a pro tour racer going out there and then, measuring himself against someone like Lachlan Morton,
who is a pro tour racer,
and just like, built for these epic things. Just, he's a different animal.
Yeah. No, I really like this. Brook has been an awesome source. Anytime I've been doing articles about bikepacking, he always has a ton of really great stuff to say. So I am very excited.
And so we thought this was a good one, as we're getting towards the New Year's and planning for the next season. New Year's I'm always hesitant with, but like we're, as bicycle riders or runners or endurance athletes, you're thinking towards what is the goal for the next 1, 2, 3 years. I think Brook's message is very inspirational. You can start at this level and then eventually you're riding, across a continent over the most difficult way you could probably choose to ride across a continent.
Yes. So whether the Tour Divide is your aspiration for 2024 or it's just like a weekend of bikepacking, I think this is just such a fun episode for, getting your wheels turning about what is possible.
And probably a good time for us to, this isn't an ad, but our friends, Matt Cady, I think they're organizing that no winter maintenance. So this is around where we are in Ontario, Southern Ontario. It's a 2-day sort of, I think it's like 150 we'll call it 150 a day. I don't think it's that far each day, but 2 days. And then there's a campground that they've secured halfway through. Very hilly route. So great if you're preparing for a gravel race or something, even like Leadville. Honestly, it would be a good 2 days of big, long gravel rides. You could do it on your mountain bike. And that's June 1, 2, I think. So if you just Google no winter maintenance camping or something, you'll probably find it.
Yeah. And I think this is going to be sort of similar to how Quebec single track last year was our big
Well, no
hangout.
promises that we're going.
We're pretty sure we're going.
I don't know. I think there's conflicts, but we'll see.
We'll see. Okay, we're hoping to be there.
Yeah.
Anyway, definitely check that out if you're looking for bike packing. But without further ado, let's get into this episode with Brook Smith. Enjoy. Welcome back to The Consummate Athlete. I'm excited. We have a guest back for the third time. We have Brook Smith, who is a bike packing extraordinaire. I have called him a professional bike packer. I don't know that you get paid, but I welcome you back in any case.
Yeah, I wish I got paid, but no, I'm not. I'm definitely an amateur. That's
okay.
For sure.
Okay. Even though bike packing is becoming this like big, it seems like professional. All the pro tour guys are going to it. You're saying there's no money in bike packing.
Yeah. Well, for me, there isn't. It seems to cost me a lot of money.
Okay. And we were just talking, you've been on, we just did a bike packing 101, which I don't even know is probably maybe early pandemic, like 2020 type thing. And then you went and did a bunch of BT and like longer ones. You got the FKT, the fastest time on our big, crown jewel 700-kilometer plus or minus bike packing route in Southern Ontario. You got that. So we had you back on and you told us about that. And then I figured, that's pretty wild. He's done. But then no, in 2023, you went and did the Tour Divide, which is, as I'm looking at this, 4,418 kilometers. So that's, I'm not great with math, but that's like a bunch. That's like 6 BT 700s stacked back to back to back.
Yeah, it's pretty excessive amount of distance. It's one hell of an adventure, that's for sure.
Okay. So I thought that's what we'd talk about. We've had a couple listeners ask, about this, which I don't know. I didn't realize we had such wild people listening, but there you go. And as always, we can learn whether we're like myself, just trying to edge into like first bike packing trips and camping outdoors in the darkness, or some folks who are looking for that next challenge. I assume this Tour Divide can even be chunked up into smaller things, like a lot of these, right?
Yeah, you could definitely like section ride the BT. Maybe I might do it between big cities, so you could have easy access to like airports and things like that. But you could definitely do that. And I've had people reach out to ask me like what the best way of doing that would be. So
okay.
Yeah.
No, I guess for definitions, they have a website. It's tourdivide.org, I think. It seems like it was easy to Google and find out information. But give us the rundown. It's like sort of from Alberta, like the border in Canada. And then you rode your bicycle vertically down the United States. And where does it end?
So it starts in Banff, Alberta, and then you ride all the way down to the bottom of New Mexico. So basically a tiny little border crossing called Antelope Wells. In that time, you climb 35,000 meters, and I think you go through Montana, Idaho, Wyoming, Colorado, and of course New Mexico in the States.
Okay.
Yeah.
Wow. It just seemed like, how long were you gone? Like what's the time span like?
Yeah. I took 3 weeks off because I had no clue how long it would take. So I took 3 weeks off and I ended up finishing in 18 days and 3 hours or so. But you definitely, logistically, you have to show up in Banff a couple days early just to kind of get everything together. And then you really don't know how far you can go each day. Like you really got to take everything kind of as it comes. Like any planning that you do beforehand, it's real general because you have no clue what the weather's going to be like, how you're going to feel, what your output's going to be. It's not like any other type of bike race, and it's even a lot different than like the BT 700 is kind of like a sprint compared to this thing, because like every single day, like it's like a bunch of those back to back.
Right. So 18 days, and what was our math here? Was it around 4,500 plus or minus? Okay, so this is a lot. This is like, so you're doing like 200 plus K days then. Is this math, is that like, these are big, and it's not flat. Like this isn't going through the plains. No. This is in the mountains of Colorado. Like you are walking up climbs a lot of the times, right? Yeah.
Yeah, you could definitely be pushing your bike a lot during this. Like an average day, like I had a lot of days that were like 280K off-road, gravel roads, a little bit of single track, and then with like 4,000 meters of elevation. And then that
Wow.
would be, you'd be doing like 3 of those in a row. Right.
Wow.
So, and then your like light day would be like, I don't know, like 190K. Maybe you get a little treat of some roads in there. So, yeah.
Right, right. Did you take any days completely off, due to recovery or just I know mechanicals and even weather could be reasons for that. Did you take any days with like 0 kilometers?
No, I didn't take any 0 days. You can kind of like if when it gets like really hard and stuff, you can always kind of like, sleep and eat and like take a couple hours, try to get like a reset, try to get back to some base level where you can kind of like feel like you're kind of in control of the situation. But, taking more than that would kind of put you off your race effort.
Okay. Now, were you riding in the darkness very much?
Yeah, there's a lot of days I was riding to like 3 in the morning or something. I like riding at night, but it's a lot slower. So you really have to kind of like, I don't know, strategize. And I did a really bad job of that because I end up like a lot of days I'd end up riding to like 3 in the morning and then I wake up at like 6:30 or 7 or something, and you already wasted like an hour and a half of daylight or whatever. And I didn't have a dynamo, so
Hmm.
everything's battery. So you have to like charge all your stuff at various places and stuff. So like there's a couple times that I had to basically just sit around, wait for my stuff to charge. So, that's not a great strategy. You
Mm,
really want to
yeah.
use your daylight hours.
How often, like, you're just sitting outside of like a convenience store stealing their electricity, or like, where do you charge up?
Yeah, so yeah, basically like in every restaurant, if you stay for a restaurant for an hour, that's enough for about a day's worth of energy needs. Everything I have is like super fast charging. Like
Mm,
you wouldn't believe the spreadsheet I have just for figuring out how to get my like lights to work, how many hours it takes, how many watt hours you need per day, how much energy your cell phone takes, all that
right.
stuff needs to be all calculated so you can figure out exactly how often you have to stop and do all that nerdery. It'd be a lot easier just to buy Dynamo Hub and kind of
Hmm.
just
Hmm.
deal with losing a couple watts.
Right, right. Yeah, just to
Yeah.
keep moving, right? Because you said that's one of the big
Yeah.
things, and we talk about that, as far
Yeah.
as stage races, marathon races, is just the idea that you don't really want to stop very much. So, how did
Yeah.
you think about that? You obviously have to stop. You also have said sleep's like really important in this
Yeah.
long days long, multi-day adventure. So, tell me a bit about that, like this idea of keeping
Yeah.
moving.
Yeah, so some of my strategies for keeping moving is like my goal when I start in the day is to not stop. Like ideally you would stop zero amount of time between when you wake up and when you go to bed. But, that's obviously impossible. So what I try to do is I try to get at least 250 kilometers worth of food when I stop for food. And then that way you don't have to worry about like places being open and stuff like that. Cause like a lot of these places you're like going to mercantiles where it's like, you know, 9 to 5 on Wednesday and Thursday only. Like it's like the hours are crazy. So you really want to basically get as much as you're stopping done early, like during the day, and then just try to ride as much as you can. Pick up water where you can. Like water is way heavier than food. Food isn't that heavy comparatively speaking, so I always rolled with like a lot of food, and like my bike would be completely full basically most of the time. I'd
Mhm.
have at least 1,000 or 2 calories on my bike for sure.
Okay. And then how are you thinking? That's really popular right now in endurance sport, is this like calories per hour and pushing what people are taking in. Like you said,
Yeah.
you'd have about 250 kilometers worth of food. So what does that mean? What does that look like to you when you're, in a variety store
Yeah.
and picking out, little cakes and,
Yeah.
and treats and stuff? Like how do you quantify that?
Yeah, so I basically eat whatever looks good. I go to the convenience store, and if I spend like 35, dollars, that's not enough food. Like I'd be spending at least 50 bucks American. And then that food is all kind of like ends up looking the same. So it's like sandwiches, chocolate bars, things like that, and like cheese. And I drink a lot of like chocolate milk and ice cream. Like I just get like a pint of ice cream and like let it melt in my jersey. They're all kind of like sealed up a little bit. So that's not, there's like a little air conditioner. And then I would just like eat, like drink the milk, like eat chocolate bars all day. I would have 2 packets with like nut based chocolate and stuff like that in it. And then I have another little bag for candy, and I keep those all topped up. And then I would eat as many sandwiches and like real food things as possible. And then I'd have that. That's like the candy is like the afterburner. So if you're run out of all that stuff, because the candy is like fairly light, and then the chocolate has like lots of fat in it, so it's like fairly dense. But like sandwiches and stuff like that, they're really hard to store. And then I go to Subway and get like 3 footlongs, and then get them,
Three
cut them into.
footlongs
Oh yeah, and like
for
you
a
get them to cut them
day?
in.
Like
No,
how?
well, I mean, you get that. Well, you get that like when you're shopping, you're getting a bunch of footlongs. You're getting lots of sauce put on them, and then you get the cookies that they have at Subway are cheap and good. So that's like you'd have a bag of cookies, and then you just be taking out pieces of cookies all day.
Right, right.
Yeah,
Wow.
like doing the actual math is way too much
Well,
mental
I like
work.
it.
You
Now you've
just
quantified food in terms of dollars, and you've
yeah
quantified food in terms of kilometers.
yeah
None of this calories or grams of carbohydrate, just
yeah.
just
Eat
the
as
cost.
absolutely. Well, eat as much as you can stand.
Well,
Like
tell me about
that's
that. Like you're mentioning all this dairy and
yeah.
milk and stuff, right? Like I'm just thinking milk was a bad choice. This is it's odd, but obviously this is like once the intensity drops down, probably that's good. It's tasty. I love
Yeah.
chocolate milk. So you don't have any problems digesting that, or did you have any problems with digestion over the course of these 18
Um,
days?
yeah, I don't know, like it's not good. Like it doesn't feel good, but none of it feels good. So it's like you need the calories, you need the fat. So you put up with it because it's perfect. It's basically perfect food for exactly what you're doing. So, you put up with all the problems with it because it's the right thing. And it's like you can be bloated and pedal. You could feel not great and still
Hmm.
put out the watts you need to do in the
Yeah.
moment.
But nothing major as far as as you say, it doesn't feel good, but you obviously kept
Yeah.
doing it. So it wasn't like
Yeah.
disastrous.
Yeah. Like you can put up with all the problems because the benefit's so good, so
What did
high.
you do? The hygiene pieces to me, probably for both Molly and I, is a turn
Yeah.
off to bike packing. Do you look at like brushing your teeth a lot, or like
Yeah.
yeah, like a couple times a day with all the candy and stuff, or like what's your tooth hygiene strategy?
So okay, so I lost like literally 3 toothbrushes because I kept it in like one of the feed bags. So I ejected like a lot of, and I lost my bear spray, 3 toothbrushes, a pair of glasses. What else? A little mini tool. Basically, like I don't know. I was just like shedding weight the entire voyage and just losing random shit. But
Pros and
yeah,
cons.
yeah, you gotta brush your teeth all day basically to, I guess, deal with all that
Okay. Did you have,
grossness and
and again, hygiene, like we recognize this is extreme, endurance, the things you're doing here. Like,
yeah.
do you shower, or is it like ever? Like, do you get I think you mentioned motel here. Like, did you get a
Yeah.
motel along the way and shower, or what's that look like?
So at the beginning of it, I would get a hotel if it's like raining or if I was like extremely muddy. So the first day coming into Fernie, the last like 10K, it was like near like maybe like 3 degrees, raining, and like just everyone and everything was super covered in mud. So I stayed at a hotel that day, and, had a shower, did all that stuff, ruined some towels. But like I basically like try to camp as much as possible just because it's a little bit more convenient. But I ended up staying in like 5 hotels in 18 days, which is good. Just I do a full kit wash. If I'm gonna be paying $100, I'm gonna get my value. Even if I'm gonna be sleeping for 4 hours, I'm gonna get the clean everything off, and it feels real good to get into dry,
Mhm.
clean kit. Yeah,
Sure, sure.
yeah,
Okay. And then always with this, I guess you weren't necessarily going for an FKT, but was there rules you were staying within as far as the like
yeah,
outside assistance, like that I think is okay because anyone could stay in a hotel, and is that
yeah.
sort of the rules you're abiding by?
Yeah. So basically, the way it works is that I guess the golden thing is you got to do it yourself. So anything that's available to everyone, people can utilize. But if it's like special things like somebody dropping something off on the course or having somebody deliver you like a wheel, that if you break a wheel or something, it's like a non-commercial entity that's considered support, for example. Getting water from, if you're in the desert and you get water from somebody that isn't
Sure.
giving water to everyone, that's kind of support.
Or you
So
have a team car
yeah,
that
that type of
follows
thing.
you the entire length of the thing or something, right? Like a
Yeah,
team moto versus stopping at a bike shop that is open 9 to 5 and
yeah,
they fix your wheel or whatever.
yeah, exactly. That's exactly it.
Okay, cool.
Yeah.
So tell me a bit about, I'm trying to think through questions that folks would be having if they were considering, if they were considering one of these bigger trips. What, as far as the bike type, I guess would be maybe one place that we'd be wondering, like, is this a road bike? Is this a mountain bike? Is it a cross bike? Like, what are you riding these days? I know you did go towards mountain bikes more. Are you still on that sort of path of things?
Yeah, I rode a Salsa Cutthroat, which is a drop bar mountain bike. It's absolutely perfect for this. It's a lot of the descents are a lot like gnarlier than I would suspect people to think, because there's a lot of like baby head descents and like rough gravel roads, like proper mountain roads. So for me, living in Ontario, like we don't really have that anywhere for the most part, but there's like, a mountain bike is definitely the right bike, drop bar or flat bar, depending on your own preference. I think it's about half and half these days what people are using. I use aero bars, which is a lifesaver because my hands go numb. So my hands basically didn't go numb during this voyage. And I used a Redshift stem, which I think is great. It's like a suspension stem that has like elastomer that has a little bit of like 20 mils of travel, which is just enough to take the buzz out of everything. So
Cool. Yeah, I hadn't seen those. I
yeah,
was thinking maybe you were going to say it was adjustable stem to move your position, but you're saying it's just a bouncy stem.
yeah.
Okay, cool. Now, so your bike doesn't actually have suspension though.
No, it's fully rigid.
Okay. Do you have any idea on loaded weight? Like there's the bike, but then I know you have all these
Yeah,
bags attached to it. So how much do you figure your bike was weighing? I assume you know because you are a spreadsheet
yeah.
guy.
I think it was around 50 pounds with water and everything. So it's like fairly light for like a touring setup. Like, and I had, I don't know, about 4.5 liters worth of water capacity.
Mhm.
And then I could carry, 200, like a whole day's worth of food on the bike. And that'd be basically completely stuffed.
Okay.
So yeah.
Okay. And your Instagram, which you can remind me of the handle there, is you've done a bunch of different posts over the last couple of years about the bags you've made, and you've now made a
Yeah.
lot of your own bags, right?
Yeah. It's BRKLYN__. So yeah, I made a bunch of bags out of pack and of different types, like X-Pack Light. My mom, when I was a kid, sold sewing machines. So, she taught me how to sew. And then I've basically been making bags and stuff for like the last couple of years, just because like bikepacking stuff is like so crazy expensive. Like I'd rather just buy like twice or three times as much fabric and
Mhm.
just make it even more expensive.
Right.
It's like you just end up with all this equipment and everything. It's way more money to build make your own bags, but
Right.
it's really fun. You get exactly what you want. Like I made, as far as it can be, I made like the front bag I made was kind of like aerodynamic-ish shape. Like it was kind of like a bullet type shape that would hopefully move the air around my like feed bags. So like I'm not sure how useful that it was from an aero perspective, but in a headwind, that'd probably be pretty
Could
useful.
be.
And
So it sort of goes out
yeah,
under your aero bar then is what I'm visualizing. Like the bullet piece, would sort of go out and come
yeah,
together about where your aero bars would end.
yeah. It's suspended from the aero bar.
Oh, okay.
Yeah,
That's neat.
it has 6 liters in the front.
Wow. Yeah.
Yeah,
I guess that's, I'm still stuck
yeah,
on 50 pounds. I'm like, I don't think I could go up any hill with 50-pound bicycle. I
yeah.
think I'd fall over.
But you don't go that fast.
Okay. Well, speaking of going fast, like I mentioned to you, Alex Howes was on, I'll put this in the show notes, of course. I think it's the Podium podcast. and he was speaking a bit towards his experience there. Now, did you cross paths with any of these pro tour folks who were doing the race or the ride as well?
Yeah, so Alex had some issues, I guess, earlier on, and then he ended up passing me at some point. I don't know how long it took, but I saw him at one point. He was really booking it, but I think he had kind of a couple issues. I don't really know. I haven't listened to that podcast, but
Something about a wheel busting or something.
well, I'm
Yeah.
sorry to hear that. There's lots of people that broke stuff. Like Katya broke a bottom bracket, and she's using one of the weird ones. I think the 47. You know what
Oh,
that is?
T47. Yeah.
The
I've
T47,
had
which
that
is
same
like,
problem, and not in the middle of
yeah,
Colorado. I had that
yeah,
in the GTA, and it couldn't be fixed. So I
yeah,
imagine, yeah, yeah.
yeah. And like lots of guys broke wheels. Some people got like many people that got booted out. There's one guy that had he started the race with a broken fork. There's all these equipment things. You gotta keep it real simple. Like if you're gonna be doing this, you know, ride the most basic stuff. 11. Don't just go with the 11 speed. It's everywhere. The Shimano stuff is really good. It's like from a not to get super nerdy, but from like a chain efficiency, it's even a lot faster than some of the 12-speed SRAM stuff.
Hmm.
Waxing your chains is really good. The synergetic stuff, lube, is fantastic. It's super fast and very clean. I think Silka makes that. Yeah.
Is it a wax-based lube or what is that?
No, actually, you don't want a wax-based lube because the emulsifier has to completely evaporate. So you want a wet lube because you're going to run into weather, obviously, but the wax lube will emulsify and basically like won't lubricate properly because you have to ride it, right? So the way to use wax lube is to wax it after you ride and then ride the next day. If you don't do that, it just makes it makes your chain quiet, but it doesn't lubricate as well.
Okay. It sounds like you've looked a lot into this.
Oh, I nerded it out so hard. Like,
well, I guess
I
lube, like, I mean, in these conditions and so long, like you can't, like your chain just can't be rusty and like,
yeah,
inefficient for days and days, right?
yeah, absolutely. Like, I like Ted King is doing 200 watts, 230 watts or something like that. And I'll be doing like 130. Like the last couple of days, I was probably doing around 100 watts. But like I started off at like 150, 160 average. And then it just went like down over time. So like I knew that was gonna happen. So that's why I didn't run a dynamo, because that takes 3 watts. And your chain can take another 3 or 4 watts, and then the bike shape of your bags can take another couple watts. Even if you're going slow, it still makes a difference, right? So guys like me have to be as efficient as possible, because I don't have the horsepower.
Well, and I mean, this is why I love coaching off-road generally, because there's so many different factors. But in these endurance things, we talk a lot about experience is just so important, right? Like the version of yourself from 6-10 years ago wouldn't have finished this thing. And it's not that you are fitter than you were 5 or 10 years ago. You probably are equal or even better, but you now are more, prepared. You have all this experience from your BT and your bikepacking 101 and all this.
Oh, I think the big thing is like, the riding a bike fast in a bike race is a lot different than, you don't have to have like world-class like eating or digesting. I think there's a lot of skills, but it's also like being able to continue to eat, continuing to, think ahead a little bit.
I mean, I think the answer is like they just don't have the experience, right? So like what's worked in the past doesn't, right? Like you just throw watts at a problem, but you can't always throw watts when it goes on for days, or when your wheel can't take this, or when your bike weighs 4 times, or 4 times is maybe an exaggeration, but 3 times, 2 and a bit times more than what a pro tour bike would weigh. You can't just send a 50-pound bike into a pile of rocks, right?
Yeah. So you have to eat. You have to eat properly. You have to be able to like you have to be able to like cry on the bike. You can't be feeling sad for yourself and also not be moving. So you got to be able to do that. You got to be able to, have all your pre-planning done, make sure that you've read all the things about where you're going. I went through all my maps and I got all the times that people like places were open. I had that on my phone in a big spreadsheet. So I knew when my next stop was. You have to keep pedaling. That's like the most important thing is, Jay Pitterbury says like moving forward. And like that's the most important thing. You have to keep going. You can't stop. You can't feel sorry for yourself. You can't, spend the extra time because like it just sucks up so much time and what have you. You just gotta keep moving. Like even if you're going slow, we're all going slow. Like you can't waste it. You can't win this thing in like 3 days. You can't go, you're gonna outrace your stomach. You're gonna start having problems. You're gonna mess up, all sorts of stuff. If you go through a rest stop too fast and you forget something, or you start just eating candy, and then what your body really needs is like sandwiches and like, like I ate a ton of burritos. Like I'm sick of like frozen burritos. But you could fill up your pockets with burritos in like 5 seconds. So that's easy, right? So and then being able to, not put on your jacket on and off 5 times in like 5 hours. Like, you just keep it on and kind of like deal with the consequences type stuff. Like it all adds up. So like, I think that for sure is experience, like finding that efficiency.
And one of the things I thought in that same interview I was mentioning with Alex Howes, he was sort of just awestruck because it was so hard for him. And so he sort of had this like, I guess this impression or this insight that like it would be very hard as a quote unquote normal person, someone who doesn't have a Pro Tour engine. Like he's like, I don't think this is even possible, but like it obviously is possible, but I don't understand how. So what's your like? Why would a normal person go and do this? Like it seems wild.
I don't know, because it was there. Is that an answer?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, that's like your classic, the Everest thing. Yeah. What I mean, did you see people like you were going, you were quick, you did pretty well with this. Like there's obviously other people. Like what was your impression? Like are people trying to find themselves, or it's just like a super hard challenge? Like what's your impression of why people take this on?
I don't know. Like I feel like I took this on way too early. Like I should have, like I've only done that BT 700 thing. And that was like, a 50-hour effort, basically like nonstop. And that was, great and a lot. And, there was some tears. I'm not gonna lie. But this is like so much more than that. So, you go these places, you find out what you should do, and then you do it, right?
Now, on that note, like a lot of people on these things find, like, as you say, you start crying and these things that, like visions. Did you find like on the trail, did you end up with any of these like just visionary, moments? You're cresting a mountain in the darkness or something?
Yeah. So my goal for this was I was not going to hallucinate, because I was kind of hallucinating a little bit on the BT 700, and I'm like very much not interested in doing that for 18 days straight. So whenever I get like all the way done, I would just go to sleep, and like, that's basically when I knew to shut it down, because like I was like completely nuked for the day. But no, I didn't hallucinate. Oh, I found out recently. I was with my riding friends, and we rode out to the Leslie Split in Toronto here. I had a couple beers, and I rode home, which was about an hour and a half. And I found out that that's exactly what it feels like to ride the Tour Divide. It's like that kind of like little bit of drunkenness, and then riding your bike at night. That's what it feels like. So if you want to experience a TD night, there you go. Try that.
Okay. And that's what I mean. I think that's sometimes, I don't know if that's what people go into it, but I think you need to be prepared that there's going to be these like moments during it for sure. And do you think that people get addicted to that in a little bit, like in the same, not not in the bad sense, it's probably the wrong word to say addicted, but we get it in the same way that I keep racing mountain bikes, vigorously because of like a feeling or something that you get out of that. So it must be, right? Like, it's just like on day, hour 50, I start feeling like this, right? Like, is that drive? Like, do you think there are a lot of people are out there on that sort of journey?
I don't want to talk for everybody of why, but for me, you do get addicted. Like, it's just such a weird and wild, complete and total departure. It's a completely different thing than you're used to. It's a different mode of existence, So I can see why people would get addicted to it, because it's not fun as such, but it's just so different that it's extremely stimulating. And raging down all those mountain passes feels amazing. Like doing because you're when you're riding, you're like, I can't believe how much better I am at downhill now than last year. Like, I did an enduro race recently, baby enduro race at Horseshoe, and I PR'd everything every single day of the weekend. And just from riding all those kilometers on, non-suspended bike, just raging down all these gravel roads, it's like it's so loose, and you're riding such a heavy bike, and it is addicting. It's totally addicting. Like, I'm gonna do a bunch. I want to do at least 1 or 2 events next year, because it does like really mess up your body. So I'm gonna do some events in the spring, and then I'm gonna take the rest of the year to do more like mountain biking and things of that nature next year.
So you mean you'll do a few like long bike packing things early in the year? Is that what you mean?
Yeah. I want to do like Doom next year, which is in Arkansas, 600K, 13,000 meters of elevation. So the current FKT is like 30 hours or 40 hours, sorry, around there. So it's a little bit shorter.
I'm just thinking here that, when someone's considering this, right? Like, I think there must be people that take like 40 days. Like, is there a lot of people back in the like 40, 50, 60 days to do this?
Yeah, absolutely. Like, for the Tour Divide's a race, right? So for the Tour Divide, the Broom is, I think it's 25 days.
Oh,
so if you fall behind the Broom for 3 days, you get set to the touring tracker, basically. So the race is less than 25 days, but like, people tour it all the time. It's called the Great Divide. So yeah, people tour it all the time. We saw all sorts of touring people going both directions.
Yeah, and I think that's the answer, when they're looking at like, how does a quote unquote normal person do that, is, well, normal people go on backpacking trips for 2 months and probably do it, like, I don't know if it's that route, but there's all the hiking routes that are right across or right, down the country. And I guess that's how they do it. As you say, they keep one foot in front of the other and rage the odd downhill down the mountain, I guess.
Yeah. Lots of people do 100 kilometers a day, and they take, that's 47 days. So if you budgeted 50 days to do it, I think that'd be, fairly doable for most avid cyclists.
Cool. Yeah. As we get towards the end here, I think the only other question I wanted to know is, like, as far as training, I'm always curious, were you doing intervals? Were you doing huge volume, or was it just like little mini bike packs? Like, what did maybe the 6 weeks out from this ordeal, like what did that look like for you?
Yeah. So basically I kind of do kind of like a weird way of doing it. I'll do kind of like a sweet spot base type program in the winter. December, January, February, and then I'll get outside and start doing a bunch of like very cold, uncomfortable, like 6-hour rides and stuff like that, kind of like bigger, kind of like endurance rides. And then as I go, I'll get a couple of bikepacking races, or not races, but bikepacking type events as I go, and kind of like get everything tuned up and take all the equipment out. And then I'll get right down to doing like 4x5s, like VO2 type stuff for the couple weeks before, and just kind of get as like fresh as I can. Nice. So it's actually fairly similar to the stuff that we were doing during the Olympic style mountain bike racing.
Sure. I love it. Yeah. So you actually sort of do like a bit of a normal progression down to like almost like you were, but then on the weekends, like you do work, full time. Yeah. So you're sort of a weekend warrior by some respects, right? So you are saying like, you try and fit in a bit of trainer riding. You live in Canada, so the winters sort of are not conducive to long bike packing, I guess, aside from fat biking now. And then,
I do a lot of fat biking.
but then even in the summer, you have to work and mountain bike and all this other stuff. So you're doing still some speed work as even in the last 6 weeks is this big event. And then on the weekend, you're doing these more adventures and specific work. Is that, yeah, I love it.
Yeah. Even with the 40 hours a week, I'd still get 25-hour riding in weeks in.
Wow.
You just do, you have to just like, it's just going to be dark. When you're doing your riding, you have to.
And would that look like though? Is that like a heavy? A lot of this is in the last 6 weeks, I assume you mean, but like is that like a heavy Friday, Saturday, Sunday, or like where do those hours come in mostly?
Probably Tuesday, Wednesday, Thursday, and then the weekend will be a lot heavier, probably than. So
Right.
you do maybe I do a lot of like 3-hour endurance rides in the week. And then I'll do kind of like a spicy day on Tuesday, and then 3-hour on Wednesday, and then I'll do kind of like a tempo thing on Thursday. And then the weekend will be like much bigger stuff. So probably like a 4 to 6 hour ride each day. And try like a lot of that too is you have to like focus on like not stopping. like once you get going, you have to have like prep in such a way that you can stay on the bike the whole time. So everything has to be comfortable, all your gear. Like I do my bike fit kind of on the run. So your bike fit like constantly changes and you have to kind of like adapt. So I've learned how to like make all the little micro adjustments and stuff over time.
Is that like during the event you mean, or like as you're building, or both, I guess?
But yeah, like when you're coming up to the event, it's like getting all that stuff dialed. So you're not hurting anything.
But during the event, were you even tweaking stuff? I know sometimes people have to, their back goes or their neck goes or their whatever, but did you find you had to make adjustments during the event?
I hurt my knee a little bit, like the underside of my knee, that really come out during like downhill stuff. So I think I moved my seat a little bit, but like I tend to ride with like for this type of stuff, I tend to ride with my seat a little bit lower than I normally would, just because you can run into a lot more problems with a high seat than you can with a low seat. So like over time, in my opinion, it's a little bit better to be a little bit lower, and maybe that's like slightly inefficient in some ways, but your body mechanics is way more important than anything else, because you can't really pedal the bike when you're in like a lot of pain.
Well, and I wonder if the low seat, it probably depends if you're someone who, like, if you have had a lot of hamstring, back and knee stuff, maybe the lower seat does, as you say, or the low seat, I could see also letting you move, like you could move on the saddle. Like if you were starting to get saddle sores, like you could move back on the saddle. Whereas if the seat was high, you're sort of stuck where you are, right? Like or you could ride the nose, I guess, but that's not going to last very long.
Yeah.
Interesting. Okay.
For the BT 700, I had my seat too high, and at the end of the ride, like I didn't want to touch it. At the end of the ride, I couldn't walk. Like I in order to get off my bike, I have to put my bike on the ground and then walk away from the bike. So like that can definitely happen in these long things. Like a little something can just multiply so much.
Which is, I think, like that's such the balances, and it sounds like you've done a good job building up those weekend rides, but that's like, it's hard to find those issues if you don't get in like these longer gameplay, 6-7 hours.
Yeah.
In the context that you're going to have to ride, like what were you riding every day, like 13 hours for 16 days, right? So at some point, like you need to ride a lot and have your butt on the saddle.
Yeah. Like for instance, one weekend in March, I rode back-to-back 8-hour rides. And in those, you just gotta adjust everything, make sure everything's working, and those little niggles like become really bad. Bad issues.
I love your thought too, like, and maybe I heard what I wanted to hear, or maybe this is what you were saying too, like just when you're out on these 5, 6, 7, 8-hour rides, like you're trying to stay on the bike and moving and on the pedals even. And I do find that's, I'll look at folks' rides, and this could be people with minimal time to train or people with, too much time to train. And there's a lot of inefficiency, right? Where there's a ton of coasting, a ton of stop time, coffee shop stops, like 45 minutes out of a 2-hour ride. And, this isn't a 2-hour ride. This is like a 50-minute ride. Is that what you meant? Like that, like you try and stay on the pedals and moving while you're out?
Yeah. Yeah. So yeah, exactly. You want to keep moving, keep on the pedals, keep your legs moving. The whole point of these long rides is to get your body to like burn fat. So, you have to kind of keep the kettle boiling, right? So,
Right. Right.
keeping a nice constant, no sprinting. Like even when I'm going up hills on these rides, I'm like going real easy. I have a power meter on almost all my bikes, so I keep it low. And then if I'm not using a power meter, I'll use my heart rate. And on a ride like this, I'll keep it in the like around 140, 142 or something like that. For me is a good like
Like in your
middle of
training
zone
rides,
two.
you mean training rides?
Yeah,
Yeah.
absolutely.
Yeah.
Yeah, middle of zone two. Don't push the top of the zones or whatever. Just get that middle.
Now, what I would imagine during the race is that then you actually would probably take the opportunity to coast lots of the time. And
Oh
if you
yeah.
can move, like you're actually, so the saying that always is you want to maximize the work you can do in training, and then you minimize the work you have to do, in the race, in the event, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
Like, I would try to avoid using my brakes. Like I coast to a stop. Any type of time that you want to do adjustment, you do it at the top of the hill instead of stopping at the bottom, obviously. You put on you when you're naturally going slow is when you want to like, put on your rain jacket or whatever, stuff like that.
Right.
When you do stop, you do everything. So every single photo I took involved a pee break, for example, and like adjusting things and like putting on gloves and doing everything that you need to do all at the same time, so you can like just not stop for the next hour and a half or something.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Cool. All right. Well, in the last couple minutes here, is there anything that we haven't covered that, people should know about Tour Divide or some of these massive, many day adventures?
Yeah. Yeah, I really think that a lot of these things, people can do. Like, I think that that's the coolest part about all this stuff, is that the community itself is like very much like, there for people, and like, wants to see people like get out there and do some crazy stuff. All the people I met were like super interesting, kind of like really unique people. Like there's just like a lot of characters uh that I met during this ride. But I think it's fairly accessible to do multi-day rides. You can make your own stuff. I'm gonna make a bunch of stuff out of some wheel bags I just got. So, you can recycle things, you can repurpose stuff. Not all your gear has to have like a bike manufacturer logo on it. Outdoor Research makes like phenomenal gear. A lot of that stuff is really good. Look for stuff that isn't necessarily at a bike shop in some cases, and that's they'll kind of like make it a little bit more accessible.
Yeah, and maybe more applicable too, to just being out in the wilderness for 20
Yeah,
days, plus or minus 20 days here.
absolutely.
Cool. Well, I appreciate you sharing all this wisdom and experience and the adventures along the way, and your the peace stuff photos and all this. You mentioned your Instagram account. We'll get that off you again, and then also your bikepacking route out of the GTA you should mention as well.
Yeah, sure. That's a bang bang route. It's 250 or 270 kilometers, and
Right
vast
out of
majority of it's single track.
and
Right
right
out
out
of
of
Toronto.
downtown Toronto. Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
Yeah.
And I've put in a few clients just for like route ideas, just to almost get out of Toronto, or like new sort of just like variable terrain routes, whether they're going to do the whole thing or not. But you said it was 200 plus K.
Yeah. But you can, you cut it down to whatever you want. It's
Right.
really easy. It's kind of like an L shape. So if you know, decide that you want to go home, like home's always kind of close, regardless of which end you start at.
Well,
So
you could, I guess, get an Uber or something, or the train, or any of these things.
yeah. Yeah,
Cool.
a bunch of it's right along the GO train route. So that's useful.
Love it. Love it. And again, your Instagram, if folks want to follow along your bike packing adventures and tips and bag construction and all this other stuff.
Yeah. It's BRKLYN__.
Cool. Well, thanks, Brooke.
Thanks, Peter.
Thanks so much for tuning in to the Consummate Athlete podcast. If you want to hear more training, racing, and endurance sport advice, make sure you subscribe to the podcast and leave us a rating and review. You can also subscribe to our newsletter at consummateathlete.com for a weekly dose of inspiration and advice straight to your inbox.